Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you are not too drowsy to digest what I'm going to say. First, I'd like to thank the Epic Foundation for inviting me over here, presumably to provide you with alternative perspectives. And so I hope you can you can actually find what I'll be saying alternative enough so that there's fodder for further reflections. Okay. The Greek word techne just means everything that's technical. But in the ancient times, it also means arts. So arts, craft, everything is techne. Things that human beings use in order to do things. So, in other words, from the very beginning, human beings are cyborgs. We aren't equipped with techne, with tools, in order to do things. So we never do things only by our hands or feet. Yeah. But in the recent times, computer becomes has kind of usurped that a lot of functions of the human being. So it kind of replaces the human brain, And smartphone goes a step further by almost replacing our human life. When you lost your phone, cell phone, you feel like you lost your life, right? And AI, for the first time in human history, seems to be able to sooner or later replace human beings per se. So that's why I'm asking, what is left of the humanity? In other words, what values do we have? What worth do we have to exist in this world? I use the word vestigial, meaning, actually there's not much left. But there's still two things, maybe among others, which are the creative and emotional capacities that we can rely on to continue to be, worthy beings in this world. Let me just first show you two dialogues from this film Alien Covenant. That the guy sitting at the piano is a replicant created by this guy on the left. And one time when they were interacting with each other, this replicant asked the master, "May I ask you a question, Father?" That's how he calls him. And then he continues to ask, "You seek your creator." They were talking about this, seeking this guy on the left. It was talking about how he has been seeking his creator. And so the replicant says, "You seek your creator, I'm looking at mine. I will serve you, yet you are human. You will die. I will not." Meaning what? Meaning I'm, to quite an extent, maybe superior to you. And how does the master or the creator respond? "Bring me this tea, David." So by saying that, he just proves that I am the master. So don't you think that you can, overstep your bounds? In other words, there's no reason for this seemingly immortal creature to be rebellious against his master, because the creator is necessarily weak. That's why they create, in order to feel that they are not insufficient. But computers or even robots or replicants, they don't feel that there's an insufficiency inside themselves. So this kind of sums up a very simple kind of morale, which says those who cannot create can't but submit themselves to the created ones. Okay, that's how the world, goes around. So I would presume to say that in the future, there's going to be only two categories of human beings. One, those who can use AI creatively and those who can't. Meaning those who are creative in general and those who can't, who aren't. Those with sufficient emotional capacity and those without. And those who want, who are on the right-hand side category, would just drown in the sea of AI. Okay, so I put so much emphasis on the importance of creativity. But what is it? What is creativity? The French Surrealist manifesto has this line, which is like, which has been circulated forever. Transmeaning what they mean by the poetic or, creativity in general is the chance meeting on the dissecting table of a sewing machine and an umbrella. And one of the painters, elaborate on this, explaining why they like this. He says, because it shows that because this line is a linking of two realities by all appearances have nothing to link them, in a setting that by all appearances does not fit them. Yeah. And, so an expected combination. And Arthur Koestler also, in his book, The Act of Creation, elaborate on this idea of bisociation, bisociation, which means spontaneous flash of insight which connects previously unconnected matrices of experience. Again, combinational novelty. And this philosopher of AI, Margaret Bowden, further elaborates on the kinds of creativity. Combinational, exploratory, transformational. The last being the most difficult. And in other words, all three different kinds of combinational novelty. For AI, the first is the most difficult, and the third, not very easy. The second, exploratory creativity, is the easiest of them. That's why they have created Beethoven's 10th Symphony, right? But can AI actually create? Not really, because AI lacks the spontaneity to create. They can't create spontaneously because they have to create at the prodding of the human beings. And then they end when the human being is satisfied. So there's no real creativity on the part of the AI. Only human beings can do this because human beings can create spontaneously. Why so? Because human beings have this inherent tendency toward discontent. And it all has to do, creativity has everything to do with how memory works. So how does the human brain work to create? There's one very important thing, is that a memory is distributed across many, many, many neurons. One memory could involve from thousands to millions of neurons and synapses. And a particular memory, for instance, the memory of today, of this moment, is distributed across many, many of these neurons. Each neuron is responsible for one microfeature. For instance, the light, the warmth, the expressions on people's faces. So they're all distributed on different neurons. That's one thing, distributed. And then it's content addressable, meaning there's a systematic relationship between the content of a representation and the neurons where it gets encoded. Meaning, one representation is one experience, one memory. And it's, decomposed into many, many micro-features. And this one representation has a group of neurons that corresponds to these micro-features. Yeah, so that's the so-called systematic relationship. And that means, each of these representations or memories will always activate neurons that are attuned to respond to particular micro-features. So if you have a new memory, a new representation of experience, it comes into your brain, and then it automatically would go to these neurons, which corresponds to its microfeatures. And that makes it profoundly easier for the human brain to find creative ideas. When you are trying to find creative ideas, you don't just blindly, walk around all these different memories and just randomly look at these microfeatures. No, it immediately goes to relevant neurons. So creative ideas come very easily in many cases because these neurons have addresses, like we all have our address, right? So in order to create, human beings use one of these two modes of thought. Usually our thoughts, switch between the associative and the analytic. The analytic is what what is the kind of mode that we are using right now. It's straight, causal, and narrow, or spiky. But when you're in the associative mode, the activation of neurons is flat. So you, at the same time, activate many representations of memories. So many groups of memories. So for instance, if I'm in the associative mode, and I have today's memory, which is being input into my brain, and then when I'm in this associative mode, I'm relaxed, I'm kind of spaced out. Then all memory, maybe not all, but many memories that have slight connections to the present memory would be invoked. That means, that means that's what I mean by flat activation of the neurons. So this mode, associative mode, is conducive to forging remote associations among items not usually thought to be related. The remoter, the more remote, the more creative you get. Because, if you combine things that are similar, it's not invention, it's not creativity, right? If you can combine things that are far apart, like the sewing machine and the horse, then if you can combine them together, that's really creativity. Of course, it has to be meaningful. All right. So when you are in the associative mode, you defocus, and you invoke these neural cliques, groups of neurons, which are of marginal relevance to the current one. And that's where creativity emerges. Okay, so let me just give you a quick example of how, for instance, water skiing was invented. It may be, according to this author, I'm quoting from someone, maybe there's someone who's sitting on the beach thinking about snow skiing. And then the skiing representation merged with the water representation, and the idea of water skiing was born. This seems too simple, but she goes on to explain maybe there are different ways to the same kind of inventions. It doesn't have to be, it's not just exclusively one path that will lead you to a certain kind of creativity. So it could be that someone who's sitting on the beach again, but thinking about Jesus walking on water, and at the same time is seeing a boat going by slowly with a fish being pulled in on a fishing line. So in this case, water skiing was born through the merging and walk on water representation on the memory, with a pulled by boat representation to give the current representation, to give move across water pulled by boat. But these two, what they have in common is this move on water. How do you move on water? But if you're not creative enough, you just think that it's impossible. I can't move on water without some kind of momentum. But a more creative person would try to think up the possibility, the ways of bringing in momentum. All right, so the greater extent to which the contributing representations differ, the more likely they are to result in, transformative creativity, which is the best kind. And this is the picture to show how the activation, flat activation of neurons work. This is the spiky. So when you think about snow skiing, you just activate this particular group of neurons. But then if you're in the associative mode, then other representation which has a very little overlapping area with this snow skiing group of neurons, then this would be involved, and then snow skiing was born. This idea of snow skiing was born. So, how is emotional capacity related to creativity? Actually, we already talked about emotional capacity, but it's not clear yet. Einstein, who's a person who actually contributes to this in a very unique way. Once he was replying to someone who asked him to write a short answer to how creativity works. And Einstein says, first of all, this is a combinatory play. It seems essential. But then he adds that it's also clear that desire to arrive finally at logically connected concepts is the emotional basis. So for him, this is maybe, at least as important as, how you make combinatory or combinational novelty. So what is this desire here? It is the emotional basis of creativity. Let me just give you a kind of funny example of how how desire works in creativity. Gutenberg invented movable type. We know that movable type was invented by the Chinese Song Dynasty of Chinese Bi-Sheng, but in the West, he was the first. And the reason was very simple. He was in debt. He wanted to make more money. So he invented this incredible thing called movable type by actually one day associating, originally printing books were done by just handwriting. And then it was said that he looked at this thing and realized that, yes, I can turn this thing into movable types. And then, you have movable type printing. So, in other words, every creative process begins and ends probably because of an emotional reason. It all has to do with how human experience works. Human experience does not begin with the brain, but with the body. And so every experience begins as a crisis of the body, but through the metaphorical transcription, in other words, activation of neural cliques, one assimilates this crisis into your brain and saying that, oh, this is not so different from what I experienced, the other day or last year. And then you recover the body's homeostatic condition. So it's always this dynamic between equilibrium, homeostasis, and the disruption of homeostasis. So every sort of attempt to resume biological homeostasis is inseparable from the regulation of affect. So body and affect are two sides of one coin. And so the search for meaning in the human being's life is precisely to try to redress disruptions of his homeostatic condition. And so it's always, the search for meaning is always an effective goal, effective project. And so creativity arises in response precisely to the impact on or crisis of the homeostatic state. which is by nature, of course, effective. But why are disruptions of homeostasis an issue? Why is it so important? Why is it a crisis? Because it stirs up a sense of dissatisfaction. What dissatisfaction? Because at the moment of the disruption, desire emerge or make its presence felt. Human beings is okay. Time is up. All right. Let me just go to the very end. But anyway, human creativity has everything to do with emotion, human emotions, and that has to do. Emotion is based on human desire. So I'm going to skip all this. That's human life. You're trying to whack the mole whenever there's a crisis, and then but the crisis keeps popping up, and so the reason emotion can serve as the foundation of human creativity is not because it is any kind of emotions. There could be emotions that for instance, anger, which would cause you to do things that are not constructive. Emotion has to be compassion. Okay. Tim Cook once said, "I'm not worried about artificial intelligence giving computers the ability to think like humans. I'm more concerned about people thinking like computers, without values or compassion, without concern for consequence." And Yuval Harari, in his book Homo Deus, also, kind of repeats the same idea that intelligence is not more important than consciousness, and consciousness is basically compassion. That's the basis of genuine creativity, right. And so what we have to, especially policymakers, what we have to do is prevent our citizens, from falling into the status of sub-AI, which, in other words, they become machines, but they're not as powerful as machines, right? If you don't have the creative as well as emotional capacities, then you're not even as good as an AI. You become automatons, and that will be the self-imposed singularity. Before AI actually takes over, you already let AI take you over. So, emotional and creative education is what we need to give our kids. And the only thing, or the best thing, not the only thing, literary artistic education. But literary education is much more accessible to the kids. But in this country, there's very little education in literature, because only in literature you can learn. I'm going to skip that. Only in literature you can learn about the emotional discontent, the stirrings of desire. Without desire, you're not a human being. But usually our desire is limited to repeating others' desire. Like, he's got the most recent iPhone, and I want one too. So this is just repeating somebody else's desire. You don't really feel, but you need to feel. Once you can feel, you can have compassion, and then then you will be able to do creative work. And every literary work involves these three aspects or stages, which is the whole process of creativity. First, discovering problems, and then describing problems, which is the main body of literary works, meaning telling stories. And then you have this denouement, where the problems are solved, even though in literature it's not always being solved in the way that people think in more pragmatic kind of professions. All right, that's what I have to contribute to this forum. Very, very humble 2 cents. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.